5 cameras in total that he had with him on top of the hill. When we arrived there at 1:30, he got his image enhancing device out and scanned his field and the field next to it with the rate and the wheat field next to that by Golden Ball Hill, and we could see then that the field was completely clear. We sat there then from about 1:30 until about just after 3, and then there was an almighty white flash of light that completely encompassed the landscape. We talked about that for a few minutes and wondered if there was something in it. I felt that maybe there's a connection, but we didn't know anything at that point. And it was around that time that Wynne realised he had to go and change his tapes over because they run for 4 hours in the vehicle. So he went down to the vehicle and changed the tapes and came back up. We sat there for about another 20 minutes, and just as some of the light began to creep in from the east, we could see a very, very powerful, imperceptible shadow on the field. So I asked Wynne to look through his light-sensitive camera to see if there was anything there, which he did, and when he got up, we could see this amazing formation laid out in front of us. But it was still too dark to actually see it with the naked eye. We could only see it through the camera. So we cheered and danced and was very happy, and then waited until the light came up just after 4, and Wynne stayed on the hill then and continued to film it as Paula and I walked down and entered the film formation for the first time.
there is no question in your mind that this was not made by humans?
Oh, no question at all. The complexity of it and the fact that we all sat there all evening and the camera footage that's there, there's no question.
In 2001, suddenly the media paid some interest, because then something appeared that was almost impossible to overlook. Right behind me is Britain's largest radio telescope, the Chilbolton Observatory. And here it was that the greatest sensation in the crop circle history was to appear in the fields right in front of the telescope. On the morning of 14th of August 2001, a formation was discovered which was different from any other previously seen. From the ground it looked like a tangled mess, wisps of crops spread around in no system. However, in the evening with growing shadows, a picture appeared, unmistakably that of a face. That picture represented a whole new technique, a screen technique, the same that's used for printing a picture on paper. 3 days later, the face was joined by something that looked like a data strip. Rows of counters made out of standing and flattened crop. But soon an astonishing similarity is discovered. In 1974, the astronomer Carl Sagan composed a message that NASA sent into space from the Arecibo telescope in Puerto Rico. Binary figures which constituted a graphic code presenting key factors about humans and the planet we live on. 27 years later, an identical pattern appears in a crop field right in front of a similar radio telescope. However, on closer inspection, it seemed to show that the code contained some fundamental differences. Sagan's message explained our calculation system, the dominant chemical substances within the elements that create life on Earth, about our DNA code, humans' height and quantity, and that we live on the third planet in our solar system, and lastly, a sketch of our radio telescope. The message received described the same calculation system, but that silicon is most dominant in life forms in contrast to carbon. The drawing also clearly shows a humanoid figure with large head in relation to its body. It's also explained that they have an extra string in their DNA, are approximately 4 feet tall, inhabit the third, fourth and fifth planets in their solar system, and have a population of around 21.3 billion. Underneath, the telescope has been replaced by something more complex. 1 year earlier, a strange crop circle had appeared in the same place. Is this the same illustration as in the sender's code? Is this the correspondence radio telescope? If this is not an extremely clever and well-calculated joke conducted by humans, is it a serious response from an alien civilization? The Chilbolton crop formations really gave new life to the speculations of who is behind this. Is it aliens? Where do they come from? And what is their purpose of this type of communication? The following year, very nearly on the same day, a new picture appears that gives new force to the alien theory, this time in Crabwood, near the town of Winchester in Hampshire. Once again we see a face, but this time there is an unmistakable resemblance to something extraterrestrial. The picture also contains a print, somewhat similar to that of a CD, with something that appears to be a coded message. This formation also has a new type of design, this time with horizontal line patterns of variable thickness, similar to that of a TV picture. The message on the disc is similar to a spiral band built up of many boxes. But data expert Paul Weige manages to decipher the message.
And I had to enlarge the disc quite substantially on the computer and run some image analysis over it to make it clear so that I could see what was a standing tuft and what was flattened. And while I was doing this, I noticed that every so often there was almost a mistake in the diagram. It was like there was a tuft, where the little square tuft, it had done sort of half size. I thought that's a bit odd, and it seemed fairly regular. I was going round, and I sort of counted up, and it was sort of literally every sort of 8 bytes or whatever. And I thought, oh, 8 bytes, and you know, from computer side, is obviously some sort of binary code. So then I, did the straightforward thing. I just converted it into ASCII, which is the standard sort of computer language that you encode the alphabet in. And of course I then started to get words forming out, and I thought, I'm getting somewhere here. So I then did the whole thing for the whole lot, and got this message.
The message is in English and reads as follows. Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. There is good out there. We oppose deception. Conduit closing. Many have been surprised by this message. Are there aliens with such faces that we should be aware of? Or is this a picture of the sender? Does this indicate the start of actual close contact with neighbors in the universe?
My own, and this is only a hypothesis, belief about this, is that there's an effort of the extraterrestrials are gradually trying to communicate with us. A very slow process, giving us a lot of time to digest the fact that we may not be alone here.
Hello, my name is Maurice Osborne. I will be your host for this documentary that exposes hidden messages from extraterrestrial beings that have been discovered in crop circle formations. Now, it's not my intent here to try to convince you that extraterrestrial beings exist or that crop circles are not man-made. There's an abundance of information from several credible sources that support these conclusions, and credit is given to these daunting individuals at the end of this presentation. Now, although I'll be describing the crop circle phenomenon, the main emphasis here will be to reveal the hidden messages in crop formations and to provide explanations as to what they may mean. The methods used for deciphering these messages are fully explained, and you are encouraged to verify this information for yourself. Let me show you what will be presented. There will be a description of the crop circle phenomenon. Then the geometric designs of crop circles will be presented. Next, some of the more fascinating mathematical aspects of the formations will be described. This is followed by advanced scientific technologies that have been revealed within the pictograms. Then an amazing face depicted within a crop circle formation will be presented. Another formation will then be shown to be a response to a message that we humans sent out into space. And finally, another facial formation is presented that has a very special message for mankind. The crop circle phenomenon began with the discovery of single circle patterns that mysteriously appeared within cultivated crop fields all over the world. They became known as crop circles. The plants inside the circular patterns were found to be lying horizontally near the ground instead of standing vertically as with other normally growing plants. These lying plants created a contrast to the even shades and colors of the standing plants. There is evidence to suggest that these circles have been found all over the world for hundreds and perhaps even thousands of years. They have also been found in grassy fields, heather, fields of wildflowers, and reed beds. Although this is a worldwide phenomenon, over 90% of the formations have been found in southern England. It has been estimated that there have been over 9,000 crop circle formations discovered all over the world just since the early 1980s. In the summer of 1975, multiple crop circles in close proximity with one another started appearing. This is an example of 6 circles located close to one another. There was also a group of 3 circles that shared a common axis. In 1989, a cross pattern was discovered with 5 small circles around a large circle. But it was in 1990 when straight lines began to appear, which transformed the patterns from simple circles into complex pictograms. This beautiful formation was discovered on August 13th of 2000 at Woodborough Hill in Wiltshire County, England. And this spectacular formation of squares depicted in three-dimensional perspective appeared on June 18, 2000 at Windmill Hill, also in Wiltshire County. On July 22nd of 2002, this beautiful pattern was discovered at South Field near Alton Priors in Wiltshire County. But the most breathtaking crop formation of 2002 was discovered on July 4th at Normantown near the ancient sacred site of Stonehenge in Wiltshire County. It is a magnificent rendering of 6 ribbons furling out from a central circle. Now those are just some of the more interesting crop formations that have been discovered in recent years. There are many, many more. But these represent a level of sophistication that clearly demonstrates a high degree of intelligence by whoever made them. However, even more interesting than the patterns themselves are the way in which they are created. And there are many mysteries involved in how crop circles are created, which usually occurs at night and in damp weather, but not always. There is corroborating testimony from several credible witnesses that report seeing strange lights in the sky above where crop formations are formed. And the vast size of these formations, some of which cover an entire square acre, would require several people working in the dark for many hours in order to try to create them. And researchers have been unable to find any tracks or any signs of human presence in the area where crop formations are formed. The affected plants inside a crop circle is gently bent over near ground level. There is no crushing, bruising, cutting, breaking, burning, or damage to the crops in any way. In fact, the plants remain in perfect condition and they continue to grow parallel to the ground, coming to full maturity and ripening. The variations in the lay of the crops are as numerous as the variations of the crop circle designs themselves. In many crop formations, the stalks give a clear indication of how and where the energy flowed in making the patterns. Some layers of crops appear to be intertwined and almost braided. Others are laid down in straight lines, but in alternate directions. Michigan biophysicist Dr. W.C. Levengood has examined plants from inside and outside of crop formations in the United States, Canada, England, and Australia. He has found a consistent combination of changes in affected plants, which include enlargement of plant cell pits, reoriented, swollen, and exploded growth nodes, evidence of rapid heating, changes in seed growth, and an increase in metabolic cell respiration. These are samples of unaffected stems taken from plants that were well outside of a crop formation. They are relatively straight. These are samples of plants taken from inside of a crop circle. Dr. Levengood has found that the top growth nodes are bent at an average of 39 degrees from the vertical. He believes that this was caused by rapid heating and expansion, followed by a collapse of the thin cell tissue, which then produced the angled reorientation. These are samples of lower stem growth nodes of affected plants. The arrows are pointing at expulsion cavities. These lower nodes have tissue that is tougher and more mature, which can sustain more pressure and do not collapse as easily as the upper nodes when exposed to rapid heating. Instead, Dr. Levengood concludes that the cell water heats up and bursts out of the lower nodes, causing expulsion cavities. Although subjected to rapid heating, the plants were not dehydrated. Their seeds germinate faster and have a 45% increased growth rate as demonstrated here, with plants from inside, at the edge, and outside of a crop circle. Dr. Levengood has stated that whatever is doing these formations is affecting the fundamental biophysics and biochemistry of the plants. He hypothesizes that crop circles are created with a spinning plasma and microwave energy. Although the crop formations appear to have very beautiful designs, they also represent a staggering amount of scientific and mathematical knowledge. And much of the information contained within the pictograms is subtle, with hidden complexities of advanced geometry. In addition, many of the formations depict advanced technologies that can be of great benefit to mankind. Let's have a look at some of these incredible formations and examine what they could represent. This is a depiction of 3 simple crop circles that were found to appear in a formation near each other. It represents only one example of the hidden complexity in their design. It was discovered that the circles were arranged in such a way that a straight line could be drawn between them and have it touch all 3 circles, here, here, and here. In addition, another straight line could be drawn so that it could also touch all 3 circles. Then a third line was found to be able to touch the circles, and this means that the circles were positioned in proportion to their size. This is a depiction of a crop circle formation that was discovered in 1998 in a wheat field near the city of Oud-Beurlen in Holland. It is by no means a collection of arbitrarily positioned circles and rings. It turns out that this pictogram was remarkably arranged so that a total of 6 straight lines could be drawn in such a way that they exactly touch 3 different circle elements. If any of the circles were of any other size or positioned differently, this would not have been possible. This is an example of a crop formation with the width of the ring pattern being the exact size where a square could be drawn with its corners touching the outside part of the ring and have the inside portion touching the sides. This is an example of a crop formation where the inside circle just happens to be the exact size where an equilateral triangle could be drawn with its corners touching the outside ring and still have the inside circle touching the sides. And this is an example of how the inside circle just happens to be the right size where it would touch the sides of a square if its corners were touching the outside circle. Multiple geometric shapes can be used in crop circle formations, as in this example, where the width of the ring is determined by the use of a square and a triangle is used to establish the size of the inside circle. This is a depiction of a crop formation that was discovered near the village of Melk, Holland, in the summer of 1997. It consists of a small circle in the middle of 3 concentric rings. The ring widths and spaces between the rings are all slightly different. The reason for this is because of a complex set of geometric shapes that were used in its design. The center circle is able to fit within an equilateral triangle with its corners touching the inner ring. This ring fits inside of a square with its corners touching the next ring. These rings then can make it possible for a pentagram, or 5-pointed star, to be used in order to determine the rest of the formation. This is the same crop formation with different geometric shapes that further define its construction. Notice how a pentagon is used to specify the outer diameter in relation to the size of the center circle. Also notice how the inside portion of the second ring is used to create 2 triangles that face in opposite directions in order to form a hexagram, or 6-pointed star. When straight lines are drawn between the points of the star, it forms a hexagon shape. And finally, the outside portion of the third ring was found to precisely touch the sides of the hexagon. Clearly, a great deal of thought went into the design of these formations. We will now examine some of the pictograms that exhibit advanced mathematical concepts. This beautiful snowflake design appeared on July 23, 1997, near Silbury Hill. It was known as the Koch snowflake, after mathematician Heinrich von Koch, who developed the concept of fractals. An even more complex snowflake pattern was found below Milk Hill in Wiltshire County on August 18th of 1997. It was known as the Standing Koch snowflake because of the standing crop in the center that created yet another snowflake-like pattern. On July 8th of 1996, this formation appeared just across the road from the ancient site known as Stonehenge. It consists of 149 circles that cover an entire square acre of a wheat field. This design matches a mathematically produced image known as a Julia set that was invented by Gaston Julia from a study of fractals. And on July 30th of the same year, a formation with 194 circles covering 1,000 feet in diameter was found at Windmill Hill in Wiltshire County. It consists of 3 strands of the Julia set. Then in August of 2000, this formation with 6 strands of the Julia set was found at Milk Hill, near Alton Barnes in Wiltshire County. And on August 12th of 1991, this incredible glyph was discovered near Ickleton in Cambridgeshire, England. It appears to represent a fractal mathematical cipher known as a Mandelbrot set. It is the most complex object in the universe and defines an eerie repeating mathematical order beneath the surface of chaos. In late June of 1995, at Longwood Warren in Hampshire County, this formation appeared, which depicts our solar system inside the asteroid belt, with Earth missing. Earth's orbit is depicted, but no planet. It has been determined that this configuration in our solar system will not occur until April 16th of 2004. In 1996, this pictogram was discovered in East Field of Wiltshire County. It is 648 feet long and contains 89 circles forming twin strands that wind around a central backbone of 12 large circles in a line. It represents the double helix of DNA, the building blocks of life. We will now concentrate on pictograms that represent advanced technology. This formation appeared on June 23, 1999, at West Overton in Wiltshire County. It is a representation of a water molecule. And this beautiful pattern is a formation that was discovered on July 22nd of 2000 at Avebury, Truslow in Wiltshire County. It appears to be a depiction of the flux lines of a magnetic field. Now you might be wondering what water molecules and magnetic fields have got to do with advanced technology. Well, the following series of crop formations refer to a new form of free energy that uses microwaves to break apart water molecules. This formation depicts a magnetron tube inside of a magnet. It is this type of vacuum tube that is used inside microwave ovens to cook your food. This pictogram is another rendition of a magnetron tube. When a surge of electricity is introduced at the center, the electrons radiate outwards but bounce back against a reflector grid due to the magnetic field surrounding it. This reflected energy is what causes microwaves that are allowed to escape through a narrow gap in the reflector. Please note that there are two small dots located near this depiction. They represent the oxygen and hydrogen atoms of water. These two small dots, one larger than the other, have been found alongside of many other formations like this one that also shows microwave energy emanating from a central core of a magnetron tube. Those two dots, which represent the atoms of water, are also depicted with this formation. Water is very unreceptive to physical or infrared heat, but at a very specific frequency of 27 gigahertz of microwave energy, the oxygen and hydrogen atoms of water separate easily. The ovals here within a field of microwave energy represents water molecules that are being split apart as with this partial piece. The dots here represent the separated oxygen and hydrogen atoms. However, once separated, the atoms recombine again naturally to reform back into water again, but hydrogen is extremely combustible when mixed with oxygen. This formation shows the effect of water burning as atoms recombine together again. This formation also shows the burning of water inside the vacuum of a magnetron. However, it also has large circles around it. These circles represent an excess of electrons that are generated when you burn water in this manner. When the process of breaking apart water molecules and allowing them to recombine again is repeated, you have an endless supply of electricity as well as combustible energy that can be used to power turbine engines. This complex pictogram tells the whole story. You begin with a negative electrical charge that is fed into a magnetron which splits water molecules. Then you have the oxygen and hydrogen atoms recombining back into water. This produces an excess of electrons that are fed back into the magnetron, which bounces the energy off of magnetic reflectors in order to produce more microwaves so that this process can be repeated. But wait, there's more. When the excess high amperage from the magnetron passes over a cup-shaped magnet with uneven magnetic lines of flux in a vacuum, temporary particles are momentarily created as represented here. This rendition is telling us that the temporary particles are magnetic. The outside ring of notched semicircles represent magnets. The round semicircles represent temporary particles. These particles are rendered as half-field circles to represent the temporary existing mass. The particles are depicted as being larger the closer they are to the smaller magnets, and rendered as smaller the nearer they are to the greater magnetic fields. This means that these particles are magnetic and are repelled by a magnetic field. The central donut shape indicates the high amperage DC electricity that flows through a vacuum, which is represented by the white circle. And why bother to create such a particle? Well, by magnetically repelling the temporary particles downwards, this causes the repelling magnet and anything else that's attached to it to be propelled upwards, thus causing flight. The H2O magnetron is only one of many highly advanced technologies that have been rendered in crop formations. However, this one discovery could have the greatest impact on human society. This formation looks rather complicated, but it's not. At the center, you have a magnetron that splits apart water molecules and allows the water to reform, causing a release of free electrons. This outer ring represents a vacuum. These notch semicircles represent cup-shaped magnets. The white semicircles indicates the resulting magnetic field. As stated before, when high ampere current is passed over a magnet in a vacuum, temporary particles are produced. However, instead of having a single stream of particles being repelled from the center of this magnet, you have more cup-shaped magnets located around the first magnet, which creates additional magnetic fields that cause multiple streams of particles. When you position many more smaller magnets around the previous ones, you are able to create a whole field of temporary particles, which are depicted here as degenerating in size. This process also occurs on the other side of the magnetron in order to double the particle field size and to counteract the repelling magnetic forces involved. We could go on for hours discussing all of the incredibly advanced technologies that the crop circle makers have decided to share with all of us, but I would like to turn our attention now to a couple of formations that shocked the world in 2001. They were discovered in a wheat field next to a radio telescope at Churbolton near Warewell in Hampshire County, England. First, this was discovered on August 14th of 2001. It was a crop circle formation that measured about 100 feet wide and 120 feet long. It was composed of about 200 circles of varying sizes that appeared to have formed a rendering of a face. When this pictogram is blurred so that the features are blended together, a clear image of a face appears. Some obvious questions come to mind. Does this depict the face of humanity? Is this the face of an alien species? Whose face is it, and what does it mean for mankind? Not only does this glyph represent a major advancement in the complexity and sophistication than any formation discovered before it, but the very location of this pictogram is also very interesting. There is an ancient global grid connection that mathematically links the location of this face to the Cydonia region on Mars and to the facial formation that has been discovered there. According to Zechariah Sitchin, an eminent scholar and author who has translated ancient Sumerian texts, the deposed king of another planet known as Nibiru, who was the first to set foot on Earth, died on Mars. As a monument to him, his face was carved out of a mountain there. I believe that this face on Mars and the face in this formation are of Alalu, the past king of the planet Nibiru and discoverer of the planet Earth long before the existence of humanity. Just 5 days after the discovery of the facial formation in this field across from the giant telescope at Churbolton, this formation appeared on August 19th of 2001. It is 75 feet wide and 120 feet long. A distinguished researcher by the name of Richard C. Hoagland quickly realized that this formation looked very similar to this message that was sent out into space back in November of 1974. Dr. Carl Sagan and Sir Francis Drake created this message as part of the project for the search of extraterrestrial intelligence. It was transmitted with 2 trillion watts of radiated energy from the Arecibo radio telescope in Puerto Rico. The message was sent in a very narrow beam towards a galactic cluster known as M13, which is 65 million light years away. It was a pictogram arranged in a matrix of 23 pixels by 73 pixels. This is the official explanation of that message. It was intended to describe our numbering system, the building blocks and formulas for DNA, a double helix symbol of DNA, a figure of a human being, our solar system, and a diagram of the radio telescope that sent the message. In order to fully understand the message, it is necessary to examine how numbers were represented. This is the pattern from the top of the message with grid lines added to make it easier to see each dot and space. Each column of dots and spaces represents a number from 1 to 10. This is the basic computer numbering system that works with ones and zeros, or in this case, with dots and spaces. But this system needs a starting point. That's what this row of dots represents. The ones and zeros up here relate to the dots and spaces here. Notice that there is a dot and two spaces in this first column above the starting dot. This is represented by a 1 and 2 zeros up here. Likewise, there is a 0, 1, 0 here that relate to the space, dot, space here, and so on. To interpret what the ones and zeros mean, we begin with the bottom digit. 0 digits have no value. However, a 1 digit in this row has a value of 1. A 1 digit in the next row up has a value of 2, which is twice the value as the lower row. Likewise, a 1 in this row has a value that is twice that of the next lower row, or 4. If there were any 1s in this row, they would have a value of 8. In order to determine the decimal number that a column of dots represent, you simply add the values of all of the 1 digits in that column. For instance, there is only a single 1 digit in this column, and it has a value of 1, so the total number is 1. This column also has only a single 1 digit, but it has a value of 2, so the total number is 2. In this column, there are 2 of the 1 digits. This one has a value of 1, and this one has a value of 2. So you add the values of 1 and 2 together, and you get the total number of 3. This column only has a single 1 digit with a value of 4, so its number is 4. But this column has 2 of the 1 digits with values of 1 and 4, so the total number is 5. Here we have ones with values of 2 and 4 for a total of 6. And here we have 3 ones with the values of 1, 2, and 4 for a total of 7. Now for this number they did something very interesting. Instead of showing a value of 8 with a dot in this row, they have a dot at the start of the next column and a corresponding 1 digit above it. They did that in order to show how dots for very large numbers do not have to be in a single column, and that additional dots can be continued in subsequent columns. So, the 1 digit in this column with zeros in the first column indicate a total number of 8. In these two columns, we have a value of 8 plus 1 for a total number of 9. And in these columns, we have a value of 8 plus 2 for a total number of 10. You can now see how the numbers of 1 through 10 can be represented by dots and spaces. Larger numbers can also be represented in this same way. This dot pattern appears just below the numbering dots. This row of dots represent the starting points for these columns of dots. They indicate the numbers of 1, 6, 7, 8, and 15. When you look these numbers up in the periodic table of elements, you find that they represent the atomic numbers for hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and phosphorus, which are the basic elements for life on this planet. These numbers represent formulas for sugars and bases in nucleotides of DNA. And this long series of dots and spaces represents the number of nucleotides in DNA, which is 4,294,966,110. Finally, these curved lines represent the double helix of DNA. So the simple dots and spaces of this portion of the message describe the entire composition of man. This dot pattern is found below the previous portion. A human being is depicted here. These dots represent the number 14, which indicate the height of mankind. And this very large number of dots and spaces represents the value of 4,292,583,750, which happens to have been the population of Earth in 1974. These dots represent the planets of our solar system around the Sun, which is depicted by this large square. Then you have Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Notice how the symbol for Earth is higher than the rest to indicate where mankind lives. At the very bottom of the message, you have what looks like a rainbow over the letter M, but actually it is a depiction of the Arecibo telescope which sent the message. In the middle of the M is where the radio energy is bounced off of the dish antenna and then out into space. The dots and spaces at the bottom represent the number 2,430, which indicates the size of the telescope. When you flip the dot pattern over, you can see a closer relationship to the telescope, which was similar to this one at Bolton in England. This is the complete Arecibo message again, and this is a graphic of the crop formation that was discovered 27 years later on August 19, 2001, next to the formation of the face and the Bolton telescope. The red dots indicate what was different in the crop formation from the original message. The dots and spaces here are the exact same binary representation of our decimal numbering system as it appeared in the Arecibo message. However, this pattern is different, while these are the same. These curved lines are also the same, but these straight lines are different, and everything else is different. However, it all directly relates to what was sent in the Arecibo message of 1974. Let's take a closer look at how these two messages are different. Although the dots for our numbering system were the same, these patterns just below it and the crop formation varied slightly from the original pattern. They represent the atomic numbers for the building blocks of life as we know it. But this new pattern has an extra column of dots that relate to the atomic number of 14, which is the element silicon. Does this mean that whoever created the crop formation has silicon in the makeup of their DNA? Below the dots that indicate the formula and number of nucleotides in DNA, which are identical in both patterns, we have these strikingly different patterns. Instead of a depiction of a human being as presented in the Arecibo message, the crop pattern has a different depiction of a humanoid form. This new depiction shows a body with 2 arms and legs like humans, but the head is much larger. And this pattern here, which represents the height of the body, has a value of 8 instead of 14 that the Arecibo message indicated was the height of man. This would indicate that this other body is a little taller than half our height. And this dot pattern of the crop formation, which represents population, is also different. It indicates a population that is almost 6.5 billion larger than our own. Now let's examine these dot patterns here. The dots in the Arecibo message represented the 9 planets around the Sun. These long lines indicated the relative size of the planets. Notice how this dot, which represents the Earth, is above all of the others in order to indicate where humanity lives. Also notice how Earth's dot is located directly below that of the depiction of man. In the crop formation, there are 3 dots that are raised above the rest. They refer to the planets of Earth, Mars, and Jupiter. However, it is the dot for Mars that is located directly below the humanoid body. Does this mean that the creators of the crop formation come from Mars? If so, why is the dot representing Earth also raised next to that of Mars? In addition to the dots for Earth and Mars, notice how there are 4 dots that represent Jupiter, which also appear to be raised to the same level. But instead of just representing Jupiter as a straight line, as in the case with Saturn, which is roughly about the same size, there are 4 dots forming a circle. Well, Jupiter is too big with too much gravity to support life. However, there are 4 moons around Jupiter that are about the same size as our moon. They are known as Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. Could these 4 dots mean that there is life on those moons as well? At the very bottom of both formations, you have these distinctly different dot patterns. This is a depiction of the Arecibo telescope that sent this message with an indicated size of 2,430. And this is a depiction of something else with a size of 6,748. Look closely. Doesn't this formation look like something that you have seen before? Well, it just so happens that 1 year prior to the discovery of this formation, and in the very same wheat field, this crop formation appeared, and they both look surprisingly similar. As previously described, this pattern represents a new form of radiated power using an H2O magnetron to generate temporary particles of magnetic energy. Could this represent a new form of communication that could be used to communicate with whoever created the crop circle formations? Let's review what can be derived from the Gibraltar crop formations. If the information provided is accurate, we now know that we are not alone in the universe. There is intelligent life on Mars and on the moons of Jupiter. We know the general form and size of what they look like, the composition of their DNA, and their population. We also know how they communicate, and more importantly, that they want to communicate with us. What this formation does not tell us, however, is why they want to communicate with us or what their intentions may be. However, another crop formation was discovered 1 year later that could shed some light on these very important questions. Now, initially, I thought that this next formation that I'm about to show you was a hoax, because I believe that it was created by someone who simply wanted to make a cartoon image of an extraterrestrial being. Now I understand that this pictogram is a deliberate attempt to show an extraterrestrial being as a living entity with a consciousness. On August 15th of 2002, This elaborate crop formation was discovered at Crabwood Farmhouse in Winchester County, England. It is a frame design that measures 232 feet by 390 feet. This disc is 100 feet in diameter. It appears to be a rendering of an extraterrestrial being holding a disc with three objects that appear to be shaped like UFOs. This is the head with a pointed chin, parted mouth, nose, and large eyes. This is its neck, the front of its torso, and this appears to be its hand holding out the disc. This has a much higher resolution quality than the facial crop formation of 1 year earlier. That is because horizontal lines of varying widths are used, which is the same way that pictures are displayed in television. The prior facial formation simply used dots of varying sizes in the same manner that pictures are presented in newspapers. This is a close-up picture of the disc. It is comprised of blocks formed by standing crops surrounded by flattened crops. It is a spiral pattern with a sequence of blocks and spaces that start at the center and spiral out to the edge of the disc. It was discovered that this sequence was divided into groups of 8 equal parts that were separated by triangular arrow-shaped symbols. When these patterns are analyzed, they were found to represent letters and symbols based upon a computer code known as ASCII, which actually spell out an intelligent message. Now, you may ask why the creators of this formation would use this obscure manner to deliver their message, rather than just displaying the letters themselves. Well, it would take a matrix of a minimum of 6 dots wide by 8 dots tall to represent each letter. If each dot were rendered in a crop field as being a block that was 10 foot square, it would require a field that was 7,960 feet square in order to display the 152 characters of this message. The pattern in this 100-foot diameter sized disc is simply the most efficient means to deliver the message. Let's take a close look at the exact way in which the message was rendered. It starts in the center. This is a close-up view of that center, and this is the same area with the standing crop patterns highlighted. The dots and spaces here represent the letters of the first word of the message. It all starts with this ever-widening curved line. There is a triangle shape where this line ends to indicate the start of the first group of blocks and spaces. Here is another one, which indicates where one group ends and another one begins. Between these two, you have a block here and one here. This is a graphical representation of the same center portion of the disc. If you compare the lengths of the spaces here, here, and here to the width of the blocks, you find that there is one space here, 4 spaces here, and 1 space here for a total of 8 parts. Each part can be represented as a 1 or 0 to indicate either a block or a space. In this way, you would then have 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0. Those digits are shown in this column here with the first digit on top. The next group can then be represented as a 0, 2 1s, 2 zeros, then 1, 0, 1, which is listed in the second column, and so forth. You may recall that this is the upper portion of the Arecibo message that represented our decimal numbering system. It represented columns of dots that were only 3 dots high. However, this same method can be used with columns of even more dots. When applied to these groups of 8 parts, we find that the first 3 rows have the values of 1, 2, and 4, just as in the Arecibo message. Each additional row is then assigned a value that is twice the value of the previous row. This row has the value of 8, which is twice the value of 4 in this row. Likewise, this row has a value of 16, then 32, 64, and 128. In order to determine the total decimal value of each column of digits, you simply add the values of each row wherever there is a 1. In the first column, we have a 1 with a value of 64, and another 1 with a value of 2. When you add 64 and 2 together, you have the total value of 66, which represents the decimal value for the first group of blocks and spaces. In the second column, you have ones with values of 64, 32, 4, and 1. When you add them all together, you get the decimal number of 101. And this can be repeated for all of the groups in the message. This is known as the ASCII conversion table. It enables you to derive the associated character that is related to a specific decimal value. Each number from 32 to 126 has been defined to represent an associated text character. Symbol characters are listed here along with their associated decimal values. The capital letters are here and the lowercase letters are here. These are the same groups which are listed again with their columns of digits along with their related values and associated decimal numbers. Shown below each decimal number is the associated letter that is derived from the ASCII table. These letters spell out the first word of the message on the disk. For instance, the first group has a decimal value of 66. When you find this number of 66 in the table of sequential values, you find that it corresponds to the capital letter B, which is the first letter here. The second group has a decimal value of 101. When you find the number 101 in this table, you discover that it corresponds to the lowercase letter e, which is here. This can be done for all of the groups in the same manner. This is the complete translation of the message on the disk. It says, "Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. Believe. There is good out there. We oppose deception. Conduit closing." Notice how all of the letters in some of the words are capitalized in order to add emphasis. In some words, like this one and this one here, only the first 2 letters are capitalized. Let's examine what this message is actually trying to tell us. The first sentence states, "Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises." This message is far too important to simply be telling us to be cautious of one another. Because this message appears to be of extraterrestrial origin, I believe that it is referring to the intentions of an alien race that could be offering us advanced technology and spiritual guidance. Although it does not specifically reveal whether false gifts have been offered in the past or will be offered in the future, it does say that those who offer the gifts have broken their promises in the past. Since this is not common knowledge, it implies that secret communications have taken place between our government and extraterrestrials that have proven to be untrustworthy. This is telling us that we should be suspicious of any gifts that an alien race may provide, and that we should not trust everything that they tell us. The second sentence says, "Much pain, but still time." Whoever wrote this is displaying compassion for human suffering, which they know exists on this planet. Although this does not indicate who is suffering, it can be assumed that the pain referred to here is caused by the bearers of false gifts and broken promises. However, it does state that there is still time to overcome the pain. The next sentence consists of a single word, believe. It is telling us to believe that there is still time for humanity to end the suffering here. The next sentence states, there is good out there. It implies that there are good entities that can help us to stop the pain. Although there is no indication of immediate help, we should believe that there are good entities that can help us. This next sentence states, we oppose deception. This indicates the source of this message as coming from a group of beings that are concerned about the dangers to humanity by untrustworthy entities that seek to deceive us with false gifts. They are making it clear that it is their intention to oppose those who would take advantage of others through deception. The last message is the most puzzling. It states, conduit closing. There is no mention as to what the conduit is used for or why we should be interested in the fact that it is closing. A conduit is a channel that enables fluids, cables, and other materials to pass through it. It is also defined as a narrow corridor for people to pass between buildings. In the context of this message, I believe that it is referring to a passageway or portal that enables the evil entities to pass into our world. The fact that it is closing is telling us that the entities that are here are unable to leave, and that no more entities can come into our world. This is a translation of the same message that has previously been distributed throughout the world. There is deception here. Someone has deliberately wanted you to believe that this message says something else. In the first place, only the first letters of each sentence are capitalized. There is no added emphasis on certain words, where all letters of those words are capitalized in the actual message. Next, there is no period after the word believe. So instead of believing there is still time, this little omission causes the word believe to become a part of the next sentence with no added meaning. Then the entire last sentence is missing, which states conduit closing. This is a deliberate attempt to prevent you from knowing this little detail. But the worst part of this deception is in the translation of the last character of the message. It is widely thought that the last character has a value of 7 and is equal to a bell symbol, which used to cause the old teletype machines to ring its bell in order to signal the arrival of a message. This is a deliberate attempt to prevent you from thinking that there is anything more to this message. This is a close-up view of the ending of the message on the disc. This solid line wraps around the edge of the disc. This portion here is the last group of blocks and spaces that indicate the last character. This is the same portion of the disk with the last group highlighted. The message ends with a triangle that faces toward the previous group. All of the other triangles face towards the start of the next group, like this one and this one here. This group represents the capital N, which is this letter here, and this group represents the capital G, which is this last letter here, and this group represents the last symbol of the message. If it were a value of 7, which would make it a bell symbol, then there would be blocks in the last 3 places, and there would be spaces everywhere else. If this is a bell symbol, what is this block doing here? And why are there spaces here? The truth of the matter is that the last character of this message is actually a comma. Now you may be wondering what the significance is as to how this message ends. Well, in this case it is extremely important. Whoever provided the initial translation wanted you to believe that there is no further information to be expected by ending the message with a bell symbol. However, the actual message ends with a comma, not a period or a bell symbol. This indicates that the last sentence is incomplete and there's more information to follow. Now, those who would deceive you do not want you to know that. As for myself, I can't wait until the next crop circle season to begin so that I can find out what the rest of this message has to say. It's been my intention to reveal some of the little-known facts regarding the crop circle phenomenon. It is hoped that this presentation has provided a new perspective and insight into what the crop circle makers intended to convey. There are many serious researchers that have devoted several hours of hard work and at great expense to themselves in order to make this information available, and credit is given to these courageous individuals at the end of this presentation. Now, please feel free to make copies of this presentation available to as many people as possible. I believe that this information is of great importance to mankind. Thank you very much.